Between 1988 and 1992, he was Pakistan's ambassador to the European Council, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Positions he held in various intergovernmental organizations include member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament, chairman of the World Trade Organization Trade Policy Review Board, and president of the Conference on Disarmament. He remained the ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva for 7 years, from 1995 to 2002, and later as the ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York for 6 years between 2002 and 2008. He served twice as president of the Security Council in May 2003 and in May 2004, president of the Economic and Social Council in 2005, facilitator on UN administrative reforms in 2006, and chairman of the Group of 77 and China in 2007. The ambassador assumed his position as permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations with the rank of Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in November 2019. He was subsequently elected as the 76th President of the Economic and Social Council on 23rd July 2020. He is a prolific writer and has lectured and published several articles and papers on various strategic, political, and economic issues. And in recognition of his services and performance in the field of diplomacy and foreign policy, he holds the esteemed award of Hilal-e Qaid-e-Azam. May I now request the Excellency for his discourse. Thank you very much from my side.
Thank you, Brigadier Jawad. Thank you for that introduction. And I'd like to also thank Professor Orsi for the invitation to speak to your seminar about Pakistan's priorities at the United Nations. The United Nations is a vital organization. It is the only universal organization in the world. Under the Charter, it has a unique role in the maintenance of international peace and security. It is the only organ, the Security Council, which can authorize the use of force by states, except in the case of self-defense, and that too self-defense only until the Security Council is able to act. It is also been provided the role under the Charter to promote international economic cooperation. A third role is in building international norms and laws, and these have been promoted in various organs of the United Nations, the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, and other organs. The United Nations has not been able to achieve the aspiration that was expressed in the Charter of turning swords into plowshares and bringing international peace and security. During the Cold War, the Security Council faced a paralysis because of the confrontation between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. But it has played an important role in building the world order, in developing international norms such as the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the law of the sea, and other international laws that have been developed through negotiations at the United Nations in various bodies. The third role that it has performed, and which is perhaps almost imperceptible because we all take it for granted, is its functional role. The functional role of its various specialized agencies and autonomous bodies, for example, in promoting international trade through the World Trade Organization, promoting intellectual property protection through the WIPO, promoting health standards and health cooperation through the WHO, promoting communications, telephonic as well as electronic, through the International Telecommunications Union. There are 14 specialized agencies and a dozen or so autonomous organizations of the United Nations, which basically enable the world to continue to function on a day-to-day basis. In today's world, multilateralism is vital. The world is facing global challenges, the COVID pandemic, the threatened climate catastrophe, nuclear non-proliferation, international terrorism. All of these issues are global in nature and need to be addressed through the United Nations. There is, of course, today also a deep division among the great powers. And some talk about a new Cold War between the US and China, between the US and Russia. If this were to happen, it would, of course, paralyze the Security Council once again and affect the work of all international organizations. It would prevent the international cooperation that is required to address the global challenges that I have mentioned: the pandemic, climate change, non-proliferation, and other similar challenges that cannot be solved in restricted forums and would need cooperation through the United Nations. The United Nations has always been an important body for Pakistan. First and foremost, it became important because the dispute with India over Jammu and Kashmir was referred to the United Nations Security Council in 1947, and the Security Council adopted several the holding of a plebiscite under United Nations auspices to enable the people of Jammu and Kashmir to determine their own future and to decide whether they would wish to join with Pakistan or India. The United Nations is also important because one of the oldest peacekeeping operations of the United Nations, the United Nations Military Observer Group for India and Pakistan, has been stationed along the ceasefire line between Pakistan and India in Jammu and Kashmir since 1948. Pakistan has also played an important and an active role at the United Nations since its admission to the World Organization in 1947. We were the product of an exercise of self-determination by the Muslims of South Asia, and we supported the principle of self-determination for all nations. And the process of decolonization was promoted on this basis of the principle of self-determination. Pakistan has also utilized its membership in the United Nations, its presence at the United Nations, to conduct its relations with over 100 plus countries where we do not have bilateral missions. And the United Nations serves as the point of contact and cooperation with these countries. Pakistan has also played an important role in United Nations peacekeeping. We were one of the earliest contributors to peacekeeping during the crisis in the Congo at the earliest moments of UN history. Since then, Pakistan has contributed over 200,000 peacekeepers in over 40 missions of the United Nations and promoted actively the role of United Nations peacekeeping as a major contribution to the preservation of international peace and security. We have also been active in the promotion of international norms on human rights, on refugees, on the creation of various organizations. For instance, both the United Nations Children's Fund and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees were the product of proposals that were advanced by Pakistan within the United Nations. At the present moment, Pakistan has a stake in a number of current issues that are in front of the United Nations. First and foremost, of course, is the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. It is on the agenda of the Security Council. It is a live dispute once again since India introduced the unilateral measures in Jammu and Kashmir, abrogating its autonomy and dividing the state into two parts, two so-called union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. And Pakistan has raised the issue once again in the Security Council. We've drawn attention to the repression that is being conducted by Indian occupation forces in its side of Jammu and Kashmir. We have called for the implementation of the Security Council resolutions calling for a plebiscite and declared that the measures that India has taken in Jammu and Kashmir, the unilateral measures it has taken, are in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions as well as international law. This situation between India and Pakistan in Kashmir remains a threat to international peace and security. As you would perhaps know, there have been incessant violations of the ceasefire by India. Last year there were 3,000 ceasefire violations, and we have only recently achieved an agreement with India to reinstate a ceasefire understanding that was reached in 2003. So the guns on the line of control have fallen silent, and we hope that they will remain silent, because this is a major flashpoint of conflict between two nuclear armed states. The second issue which preoccupies us is, of course, the issue of Afghanistan, where the United Nations is also playing a role in providing assistance and support to the government in Kabul. We are happy that the international community has agreed to our position, which has been consistent, that there is no solution to the Afghanistan war except a politically negotiated settlement. We are very happy to have played a role in facilitating an agreement between the United States and the Taliban for an orderly and responsible withdrawal from Afghanistan, and for negotiations between the Afghan parties to achieve a political settlement. The third issue of importance to us is the whole issue of terrorism. Pakistan, as you would all know, has been in the eye of the storm as regards the whole problem of terrorism ever since the end of the first Afghan war, when the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, and the problem of the reconstitution of terrorist movements from among the fighters against the Soviet Union emerged, and Al-Qaeda was one of those products of that phenomena. We have, of course, been strongly affected by the US intervention in 2001 in Afghanistan, and the collaboration with the United States to destroy Al-Qaeda and related terrorist organizations, Pakistan has suffered over 80,000 casualties in this war on terrorism. Our economy has been set back hugely by this war. We have succeeded after major military operations to clear our frontier territories of terrorist organizations. And today, we still face the problem of terrorism, but this is terrorism that is externally sponsored by our neighbor India from the ungoverned spaces in Afghanistan. And this is a challenge that we are facing today, and it is also an issue that we have raised in the Security Council. The United Nations has also adopted a global counterterrorism strategy to which we have contributed. This strategy is now under review, and there are new dimensions to the problem of terrorism, including new extremist movements, right-wing extremism, and other forms of terrorism that have emerged in Africa and elsewhere. And the new strategy will have to be more encompassing to address all these challenges. A fourth issue of importance to Pakistan is the whole issue of disarmament and non-proliferation. Pakistan has been a reluctant nuclear weapon state. We would have preferred a South Asia free of nuclear weapons. We proposed a South Asia nuclear weapon-free zone to our neighbor India. However, India did go forward with its nuclear explosions, and we were obliged to follow suit. But Pakistan, despite not being member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, we have adhered to the principles of non-proliferation, and we have strengthened the safety and security of our nuclear weapons stockpile and our strategic capabilities. And we have done so at various times in cooperation with the United States. Our safety and security standards are better than most countries. Our non-proliferation record since these measures have been instituted are extremely impeccable. Export control regime is up to the highest standards, following best practices adopted by various countries, including the United States. Pakistan seeks a mutual restraint regime with India to control arms and prevent the escalation of another arms race between the two countries. We have, as yet, have not found a reciprocal positive response from our neighbor, but we will continue to pursue this. We, of course, are also concerned by discriminatory restrictions that have been placed on Pakistan's civil nuclear program. Civilian nuclear cooperation has not been made available to Pakistan. It has been made available to India. And this is another issue that we have tried to resolve through our discussions, bilateral and multilateral, with various friends, including the United States. As you would all know, of course, the United States is an important member of the United Nations. It is the country which actually was the inspiration for the United Nations, and it is even today. It has played an important role in the evolution of the World Organization. It contributes 25% of the budget of the United Nations. The United Nations practices and culture is very largely influenced by the United States. But of course, over the last 4 years, there was a conscious policy from the United States to disengage from the UN and other multilateral organizations. And this contributed to a diminution in the importance of the United Nations in global affairs. Everyone at the UN is very happy that America is back and that the new administration in the US has committed itself to participating actively at the UN, to reviving multilateralism, and to work with other member states to promote the goals and objectives of the UN Charter, as well on peace and security, international economic cooperation, climate change, etc. Pakistan looks forward to cooperating with the United States at the UN on all issues. We hope that the US will revive its engagement actively, and that we will, because of the US presence and cooperation with all the members of the United Nations, that we will be able to respond to the global challenges that we are facing, to address the pandemic, to promote the sustainable development goals, to address the challenge of climate change, and to make the United Nations a more active and more effective place where we can resolve all the problems that face the international community. We look forward to that participation, and it is my hope that as President of the Economic and Social Council, that the US will be participating actively and promote a solution to the challenges that the world faces today. I'll stop here and be happy to take any questions.